Welcome to The Road to Innovation, powered by the Kleinert Foundation. On each episode, we delve into innovative solutions to society's most pressing issues like sex trafficking, homelessness, and poverty. We hope that with each conversation, you'll be inspired to take actionable steps towards social change. Here's your host, Hannah Rabelais from the Kleinert Foundation.
Welcome back to another episode of the Road to Innovation podcast powered by the Kleinert Foundation. Today we have a very special guest, the founder of Shepherd Inn, Victoria Shepherd. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so excited for our listeners to hear your story because you are really solving a big need in our city, and there's such a gap, and that these young people that you are serving and living with really need your services. So I'm so excited to share your mission and what you're doing with our listeners. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Hannah. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. So before we dive into what you're doing now, can you share about you have such an interesting background, interesting journey, and you actually worked at Cafe Momentum before you decided to, walk out on faith and open this home. Can you share just like what your journey was before you started Shepherd Inn?
Yeah, so I was working at Cafe Momentum for the last 3 years, seeing different youth come and go, and I got to know literally hundreds of young men and women, especially doing all of the training, the job skills training that I did. There is, I don't know if you know about the restaurant industry, but there is kind of some downtime. You'll either be like doing silverware or like prepping for catering. So you have a lot of time to just sit and listen and talk. So I would literally just hear about their lives, where they were living, where they were going to stay that night, if they got kicked out of the house they were in, what they were going to do. And so I got to hear a lot of very interesting stories about how, I'd say, this is, my opinion, just from the amount of kids I've talked to, is I would say about 75% of them did not have a stable living environment. So,
what is a stable living environment? Can you just define that?
For me, it would be, if you ask a youth, if you ask a teenager, do you think you live in a stable living environment? If their answer is anything but like, yes, period, done, then there's an issue. Just because somebody isn't living on a park bench, it doesn't mean that they don't have a stable living environment. They can be couch surfing. Maybe they get into a relationship with an abusive person just so that they can have a bed to sleep in, and they take that abuse and it affects them for the rest of their lives, all because they didn't have anywhere else to go. And I've seen and heard every situation that you can even imagine, some that you can't. And it's heartbreaking.
So what were some of like the biggest lessons and insights that you learned while working at Cafe Momentum?
I'd say one of the biggest lessons I learned was self-care. If I don't take care of myself, then I can't take care of them. That was probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned, along with listening. A lot of people will, they'll try and figure out the next thing that they're going to say while the other person is talking. And I think that it's something that a lot of people do, and I used to do myself for sure. So I think working at Cafe Momentum, it made me realize that, like, not even just youth, but people in general, they want someone who listens and someone who cares and who's sympathetic and empathetic to what's going on in their lives.
Can you help us? So how do you recommend listening better? Because I think that's one thing that we all need to do, especially during this time where there's so many voices out there. But we all need to take a time right now to listen. So what are some of, tips or tricks to, become a better listener?
So I've learned a lot, just not even just working with the kids that I work with, but having them in my home. I've learned a lot about myself, and learned that, not everybody interprets things the way that I do. And it is so, I've actually had to kind of incorporate that into the training that I did at Cafe Momentum. It was like, are you visual, auditory, kinesthetic? Like, you need to figure out what type of learner you are. That also entails what type of listener you are. And so, like I said before, a lot of people will just kind of like, they won't really listen to what you're saying. They're just like, oh, I'm going to one up you in my story or something. And so what I've learned is, with a lot of the girls that have been in my house, is that they don't necessarily want advice. I mean, they might want it later on once they've built and gained that trust from you, But in the beginning, in the initial, they just want someone to listen, just hear them out, be like, man, that sucks. Like you don't have to say anything else. And then if they want your advice, then you can give it. That is my best advice to anybody who is working with teens, or just like actually anybody in general, just people, is unsolicited advice is not always the best way to approach a situation where somebody's really, really upset about a situation. It's just kind of like, be quiet and listen.
Great advice. Thank you. So how and why did you start Shepherd Inn? So we kind of talked about what you did at Cafe Momentum. So because you got firsthand on the ground experience with these young people. So why did you have to start Shepherd Inn?
So kind of like I said as well, working with them, I would hear stories about, most of them did not live with relatives or biological parents. A lot of them, either lived with a grandparent, boyfriend, girlfriend, that type of situation, stranger even. So it all kind of started, sorry, I'm really crying. So last year, so I'd said that I worked at Cafe Menem for 3 years. And my kind of story that I tell people is that I worked at Cafe Menem for 3 years, and I took a 9-month break last year. I usually say, I wanted to go back to school. I was, overworked, stressed out, which all of that is completely true. But, what really happened is, I messed up, and I lost my job. And they let me go. Sorry, only my parents really know that.
No, it's fine.
But I just felt like I needed to kind of like get that off my chest, because it's the reason why all of this started. It's the reason why, it was like a swift kick in the butt, to be like, hey, you need to get your stuff together, because you have something much greater meant for you to do, and you can't screw this up again. So I worked really hard. They took a second chance on me, and they hired me back in November. So about 9-10 months later. But that's really where all of this started, is me losing my dream job. And so I wound up being like, okay, I got to do something. And so I did. I went back to school. I enrolled at Eastfield for social work. And I still wanted to stay connected to the kids, because I love them so much. And there were a couple, I won't like say their names, but there's one girl, I'll call her A. I would pick up her and her baby, and we would go out to lunch once a week. And I actually wound up employing her at the restaurant that I got a job at managing, Olavella's in Victory Park. And I hired her as a server. So it was really cool to be kind of like full circle, where she was at Cafe Menem, and then I trained her there. And then for her externship, I hired her at my place at Olavella's, and then I trained her there. And she worked there with me for, oh my gosh, like 4 or 5 months, until I wound up leaving for another job. But I wound up taking in another girl, or sorry, not taking another girl. I started taking another girl out to eat every Friday. Her name is Z, and she wasn't doing well. Just home situation was really, really bad, and I didn't know what to do. And then one day I literally woke up and I was like, I know I have like no money, no resources. I have a 1-bedroom apartment, but she needs more than what she has. And so I got to know her mom, and I just straight up asked her mom, I was like, would you feel comfortable giving me temporary custody of your kid? And she just said yes. We went and signed the documents. And May of last year, in 2019, she moved in with me. I turned my living room into a bedroom. And so for the next couple months, just kind of rehabilitated her, got her like mentally and physically better. We lived next to a YMCA, so we would go to the gym like 4 or 5 days a week. Spent a lot of time together. I even took her on like a family reunion road trip to New Mexico with like my dad's side of the family. So that was pretty interesting. But I wound up getting her back into school at Cornerstone Crossroads Academy. That's always like that first step for me, was like, I need to get her back into school, because she had dropped out of school. She dropped out of the Cafe Menem program. She wasn't living up to, like, I know you say like your full potential, but she wasn't. And I knew she had a lot more in her. And so that's where I was able to basically get this house. Is, like I said before, I had no money, I had nothing. And I had this insanely big vision, this dream of living in a house with a whole bunch of teenage girls and being able to like walk them to school. And I didn't know where that was going to happen. I was like, I live in Lakewood right now. Like, what's going on with this? And so her school actually bought a larger school in South Dallas in the Wheatley Place district. And I just went over there one day with them and I was like, I could live here. I was like, I think this is it. And so that very next week, I went and looked at a house, the only house for sale in the entire neighborhood. It was 2 blocks walking distance. And it was this house that I had dreamt of where they would be able to have a gym in the garage and everybody would live in the house together in a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. And it was perfect. And I didn't have any money. So I went to Wells Fargo and I was like, hey, I have no money, but I have this big dream. What can you do for me? And the guy was like, well, there's a grant available, but it's not open to the public for 2 more months. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know too about that. And he's like, let's just apply and see what happens. And I'm not kidding. It was like 24 hours later, I got a call from him. His name was Joe James. And he was like, hey, just so you know, you got pre-approved for the grant and you got pre-approved for a $110,000 loan. And I was like, no.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That does not happen every day. Wow. Mm.
So I called my friend Destiny Sykes, who's a realtor, and I was like, hey, dude, I'm like, I need to put an offer on this house. So she did, and then we went back and forth for 2 days between like somebody else with a cash offer, and literally 2 days later, I wrote them a letter, and I was like, I need you to give me this house for X, Y, and Z reason, and they did. And then 5 weeks later, I moved in with Z. She had her own room and her own bathroom. It was really cool. And then 2 weeks later, I called an old employee of mine from Olavella's who is what I call houseless. She was living in a hotel with her daughter, her 15-year-old daughter. And I was like, you know, what's going on? How you doing? And she was like, actually, last night we got kicked out of the hotel. And I was like, good for you. I got an extra room.
Wow.
So I had this idea that like, if she just saved up for an entire month, then if she had no bills for a whole month, then she could get herself an apartment and furnish it and she could have savings. And I'm like, this isn't rocket science. Like, let's just do it. And so we did it and it worked. And a month later, she moved into her apartment and her and her daughter are doing great right now. She's got a job in downtown. Her kid's going to school. It just, that's whenever I realized like this can work.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need a lot of money because I was already paying my mortgage. I already had the electric and the water bill. I think I asked her, I was like, hey, can you chip in like $100 for the water bill? And she's like, sure. And that was it. And I mean, she didn't even need to do that. And so that's where this whole kind of Shepherd Inn started, was people don't need years and years and years of time. They need a couple months of intense like love and care and shelter and like basic necessities in order to get on their feet. And they need, and especially when it comes to the age range that I want to do, which is 15 to 22, it's called transitional period because it's a transitional period in your life where
yes,
you need a lot more help than I guess what is being offered.
So how do the youth that live with you, how do you find them? So we've heard like you actually knew them from previous, employment. How else can the youth find you to live with you?
So I interviewed a lot of people like that were doing what I'm doing. So like Buckner, Jonathan's place, there's a place called Trinity House Restoration. I interviewed a lot of people. And so just by doing that, whenever COVID-19 happened in March, that was a huge, like very pivotal point for us is like there was a girl that was at City Square with track. They have a program for girls and boys that age out. And I literally just got a random call one day from a number I didn't know. And she was like, oh yeah, Letitia from Buckner. They didn't have any room for one of the girls so in my program. Do you have a place? And that's just it was just referrals. It was, I heard from this person that you have this. Can you help me out with this? And it was like day after day, multiple times a day, I would get calls from people that either knew City Square or Buckner or Trinity. It was just one after another.
Wow. So there's clearly a huge need in that the organizations that exist now, I mean, there's not enough beds. So can you talk about like, what's that been like? Is it overwhelming to get all these requests that you can't fulfill, or knowing that these organizations don't have the room for everyone? Like what does it look like in Dallas for these youth? Because everyone's at capacity, and especially, for COVID-19, I can't imagine what the landscape is right now. Can you just kind of share some insights about that?
Well, obviously we got our 501c3 underneath Women's NPA April 30th. And I always say, I'm like, there's no coincidence in this, because an hour later, I got a call from City Square for a girl with a baby. 3 hours later, we had an emergency intake from a girl that had experienced domestic violence. And we filled up immediately. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I have a house manager in one room. I've got myself in another room. I've got two girls with a baby in another room. I'm like, we have no more room, and it's, quarantine. So we're all kind of like stuck in the house for the most part. I'm, half working from home, half still working at Cafe Minim, and just being like, you know what? Like, I just felt this calling that like there was so much more that I could be doing. I was turning down 2-3 girls a day on a consistent basis calling me, and I was like heartbroken every single time I had to say no to them. And so I was like, you know what? I don't have a whole lot of money, but I have some savings. And so I kind of did my budget, figured everything out, and I got another house. So I got a second house, this is the house I'm in right now. It's a townhome a mile away from the original, we call them the Dunbar house and the Meadow house. So I did it so that it freed up not only a room in the first house, but it freed up 2 more rooms in the second house. So now the original house is completely full. It's actually full with kids from Cafe Minim. So that's actually, I love these girls so much. And so it's going to be good to kind of see where this goes.
Yes. So how can people get involved with you? So you're kind of in this moment of expansion. I know you have a bigger dream. So can you share a little bit about what's your bigger dream, and then maybe how people can get involved?
So the bigger dream that we have right now is we found 20 acres in Ellis County. And I said this for a long time. I was like, I can see myself I said 10 acres at the time, but then, it kind of expanded. But I was like, I want 10 acres, 30 minutes south of downtown, and I want it to be $100,000. Like, I literally spoke it into the universe and looked on Zillow, and it was there. There was 2 10-acre plots right next to each other, owned by the same guy. And we're working out a deal right now with my realtor. We're working with the assistant fire marshal to, see what these buildings look like on the property. There's a massive floodplain in the middle, but it's exactly what I wanted. We wanted a kind of a nature preserve, have a little pond in the middle, go fishing or something. We have an area built out for a motocross track. It's something completely different than what I've done, but my boyfriend, he has, him and his family work on a motocross track in Corsicana. And I've always what's an outdoor, cool, fun activity that the boys and girls can do. And maybe they can learn how to do something completely different than what they've ever done. And I was like, oh my gosh, he teaches motocross to youth already. Why not just go from Corsicana to Ellis County? So that's going to be on the property as well. And then we want to have on the top of the land, have a wedding event venue, because that's something I did at Cafe Minim for 3 years. Is I did the event coordinating, the catering, as well as all the job training. So I'm like, what am I good at? I'm good at that. So I can teach the youth that are living on this land. I can teach them how to either do hotel management, event coordinating. They can learn how to be groundskeeper, gardening. I've been talking with people from Bonton about possibly doing a garden at our original home on Dunbar. So maybe we can, get them to do a huge garden, horticulture type life skill at this place too. The possibilities are so endless right now. And we want, our next step right now is we already have single mothers, and we already have young women, and we want to include boys. We want to include young men, 15 to 22, into our program, because that's something that I'm really good at, is connecting with the teenage boys and the teenage girls, especially working at Cafe Minim. Whenever I first started working there 3 years ago, it was a majority boys. Now it's kind of 50-50 a little bit with boys and girls, but it was majority boys. And so
are the needs different? Are the needs of the youth different, male versus female? Can you talk a little bit about that? If there's any differences, there's different services that you kind of provide for one group versus another?
I don't think that they're kind of any different, because we do so we have life skills classes every Tuesday at 6:30, which we do 6:30 to 8:30. The first hour is the life skills. The second hour is dinner. And so we'll usually have it's mainly just been my family members that supply the dinner. So I think it's my mom this week. But we do like sex education. Like right now we partnered with Interrupt, and we have a 6-week course with them where they're going to provide Zoom and then hopefully in person if that kind of allows itself to. But we had originally, when the last, I guess, 2 months, financial literacy with a friend of mine who was a financial advisor at a car dealership. So he was able to actually do like credit cards and what does it look like to actually get like, you know, a car loan or a note and paying off stuff on time and how does that affect your credit. And so that was really cool to watch the girls like taking their notes and stuff. And I'm like, man, I'm learning a lot too. But we do, life skill classes on Tuesday. So if anybody has like a specialty or if they're really good at something and they're willing to either do Zoom or social distancing in person, maybe, I'm not sure, but yeah, we're open to, you know, getting more of those on our belt. So.
Yeah, I think the more people, that's exactly kind of what your point was before. It was like the more people that they interact with different, like something that's beyond the bubble. And that's something that I learned from Cafe Momentum. It's like most of this youth don't leave like a 5-mile radius. And so what they see every day is what they believe is what's possible for them. But it's like, no, the sky's the limit for y'all. And so I love the idea of bringing in people who have those specialized skills to show them like, hey, you could do this. I love that. So what are your current and future needs right now? So we need some more people to come help with some life skills. Is there anything else you can share with our listeners?
So current needs, so I don't know if I said this, I don't think I did, but I took a massive step in faith and I quit my job. And we were able to fundraise the last 2 months about $11,000, which made me feel a little bit, you know, comfortable to kind of step out and do this. And like, you know what, if I was able to fundraise 11 grand in 2 months, working full time at Cafe Momentum and only able to do this a fraction of my time, then, you know, I really need to step out and I need to do this full time. Like I can't, if I want to walk the walk and talk the talk, I have to be able to take care of these girls, and we have a baby in the house too. So there's a lot of need. And if I've learned one thing from taking care of that very first girl, it's that I originally thought that she needed money. She needed me to buy her things that she didn't have, but really looking back on it, she needed my time more than she needed anything else. And so like, I didn't want to make that mistake again. So I just quit my job. I put in my notice and so I guess, sorry.
Do not apologize. You're making me tear, so you're fine.
But yeah, so current need is, it costs us about $5,000 a month to run both homes. So we have enough for, I guess, 9 weeks from today. And so I was talking to my house manager, and we have our babysitter over today too. And I was like going over the budget, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like I had my savings and my checking account, and I was like, I had like $195 in there, but I was like, you know what? Tomorrow is going to be the first day that we are fully supported by donations. So it's super scary, but it's exciting. And I know that, you know, I know that what I'm doing is something that needs to be done. So.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It needs to be done like now, or even years ago, this needed to happen. There's so many youth that have fallen through the cracks of our systems. And yeah, it's so simple. Like you said, I think we believe that we need 100 grand to do this. It's like, no, they just need a place to live and save up and be nurtured and loved. It's so innovative. It's so simple, but innovative at the same time. And I love that you put the power in the youth. It's like you give them the place to stay, but it's like you have to do the work to get yourself, you know, to the next level. But yeah, I would love rent-free for a month. I think everyone would just love that load off of you, especially when you're young and you have to be the adult most of the time for themselves. So So are there any resources that you can share with our listeners? Were there any books that you read to help prepare you, or did you just dive into it, or, you know, anything that you could share with our listeners to read or watch or anything like that?
Well, myself and my house manager, we actually signed up for, even though I don't have a social work degree, she's the human services degree side, but I signed us up for CEU, so continuing education units. Even though it doesn't really do anything for me because I don't have a degree, I was like, I still want to take these. They're like usually an hour and a half or 2-hour classes online. But anybody who wants to work with youth, even though people say like CEUs are for, if you're in social work, you need 20 hours a year or something for your degree. Well, I don't have one, and I still think that these are insanely useful. Like hearing about, new ways of coping skills. There's like, we learned like these new like tapping, like in sensory, and there's a lot of really cool resources online that I've learned so much. Like obviously because of COVID happening and a lot of us, kind of working from home, it has allowed me more time to do, I think we've done a total of like 85 hours of continuing education. Because we would just be like, what are you doing today? And I'd be like, well, I got like 2 hours to kill. Well, let's log on and do one on abuse and neglect. Okay, cool. So you don't need to do these if like you're, if you don't have a degree. I think anybody who is working with youth should do them regardless if you have a degree or not. So that's kind of my resource on that one.
Wonderful. Would you even recommend that for volunteers who want to get involved with organizations like yours? Like just, expand your horizons, watch something. Get to see. Yeah, I love that idea. So is there anything else you want to share with our listeners before we wrap up? Is there anything on your heart that we didn't get to touch on? Anything like that?
I don't know. I think I always just like, anytime I talk about this, like I just get so passionate, and I want people to be like, just like, jump on board with me. But there's always one like statistic that literally just like keeps me moving every single day. And it's 1.7 million teens experience homelessness every single year. 1.7 million. And I'm always like in awe of that number. And it's always said that like 23,000 youth age out of foster care every single year. And that blows my mind because these kids have no family, they have nowhere to go, they have no resources. So if we can impact even one of their lives, like why would we not do that? Why wouldn't anybody do that? Yeah.
Yes. And I think because this, in our current culture, like we need to scale things and everything needs to be this huge organization, but it's like, it's really, the work is on the individual level, because that's where the ripple effect is, especially when you think about young teen moms. It's like, if you affect their lives, and their children's lives are going to be better. And it's like, we forget that having an impact on 20 people is worth it, and I don't know. I hear the scale, and it's like, we need to think about individuals. I think that's what the beautiful thing about COVID is. I know there's a lot of bad, but
a lot of
shown,
good has come out of it. But I did want to say one more thing. So about the land that we're going to get. So because we are working with, young ladies and single moms, obviously I said before, we really, really want to have a little cottage for, teen boys, the 15 to 22. And what we really want is to kind of get across to everybody is we want like a community environment where they can learn and they get life skills, job skills, the opportunity to complete their education. That's literally number one on my list of every single time somebody comes in. I'm like, how many credits do you have? Let's find your transcripts. Is that right there? And then access to mental health services. Like that's something that we're super passionate about as well. Working with other nonprofits that can provide counseling. So that's huge with us as well. And then also too, they're just far enough away from these negative influences that have kept them from reaching their full potential. And we say that a lot, like at Cafe Amenum, is like, we want these kids to reach their full potential. And that's exactly what like I want for these kids as well. And, it's always that saying, like, don't give a person a fish, teach them how to fish. It's like, that's the concept that we like, that's something that like, I just always want to like write on the wall somewhere, because it's a concept that is so simple and a lot of people don't use it.
That's the perfect way to end. Yes, exactly. Yes. Well, how can people get in contact with you? Do you have a website? Do you have social media? How can people find you to donate to you or get involved? Can you share those resources?
So we have shepherdin.org. And also Facebook is facebook.com/shepherdinn, and Instagram is shepherd.in, INN on all of that. And then if we have our email address, there's my name is Victoria at Cafe, or sorry, I almost said Cafe Menem.
Habit.
Yeah, that's so funny. Victoria at shepherdinn.org, or we have our info at shepherdinn.org, whichever one. And we're launching it actually tonight. Our campaign for the land is, if you're a person, if you're a family, if you're a business, we're doing kind of like a for sale 1/4 acre lots for $2,500, and whatever name you choose, business, family, it'll go on a plaque on our wall in our reception for, whoever donated that 1/4 acre to us. So, yeah, if you'd like to donate, please go to our website.
Again, thank you so much for your heart and stepping in faith and really filling such a huge gap in our city and probably in our country. I'm sure Dallas is not the only one experiencing something similar what we're seeing here in Dallas. So just thank you for your heart. And thank you everyone for listening. Please go check out Shepherd Inn and consider supporting them. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Road to Innovation, powered by the Kleinert Foundation. If you'd like to learn more about today's social innovator, please visit kleinertfdn.org or the podcast website at theroadtoinnovation.com.